Hey everybody, I'm just waiting for the recording to turn on. I believe it started now. So this short video, or hopefully shorter than the last one, is about the first review of the mentoring agreement and your second tripartite, which you will do in January. And essentially guidance really for that review, which in sort of a way is self-explanatory, but nonetheless. And a little bit about sharing some learning from previous years and how these things go. I think most of you will be meeting around the week of the 8th of January, probably do the second tripartite then. Hopefully you will be able to do that, and to have a conversation or a discussion about the mentoring agreement with you, because that is essentially going to be led by the mentor and the apprentice. So just thinking about formative assignments, just the submissions of those so far, the first direct observation and PLE feedback, 16 to 46. Not too sure why people aren't uploading all of these. I think they're mostly done, but I may be wrong about that. I did notice one or two more uploaded today, which is the 18th of December. The agency descriptions, very good on that, 39 out of 46. For the other 6 or 7 people, if you haven't done it now, feel free, upload it. I will have a look. And I've suggested some people to make some changes, and I'm happy to look at those. So I will keep on doing feedback. There's something new today, the IAT standards, and I'll come back to them. And of course, you have the second tripartite. And as ever, you can always contact me if you have questions. The SRAs also and the mentors are there to support you. So, assignment instructions, what are you supposed to be doing? Just to contextualize this, all of this material is going to go into a portfolio at the end of the year. There is a portfolio template in the module documents folder on the front page of Canvas. The portfolio starts off with a confidentiality statement, so you don't actually need to do that. I'll tell you more about the portfolio as we go, but just to kind of really for context, I'll say a little bit more about what's supposed to go in it and how much you actually have done already. Just as a general rule, make sure no PLE are identified in any sort of a way, not just names, but no email addresses, other identifiers, and so on. So you can cut and paste your existing work into that template and must ensure that you include all elements. I'll come to what all elements means shortly. So this is how your marks for the module are distributed. Essentially, the portfolio, I know it kind of sounds odd, 32, 48, but that just really means the Viva is 20%, a fifth of the marks, and everything else is 80%. And that 80% is split up in that way, if you see what I mean. You're compiling this over the years. So it's essentially a bit like coursework. So try to do each element as thoroughly as you can. That will make life a lot easier for you when you come to do your final portfolio submission in June. The Vive is the last assignment. Don't worry about that for the moment. You'll get plenty more advice and guidance about how to do that. So these are the portfolio elements, and you must include all of these. So some of this you've done already, and essentially really those are those dark green here. The confidentiality statement, you'll just sign that anyway, so I'm assuming it's done. The mentoring agreements and reviews, that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. The personal statement of apprentice journey into social work, you submitted that in your first module 4011, so you already have done that. Feel free to update or revise in your final portfolio. The agency description, I've seen many drafts of those, as I've mentioned already, and, I expect or anticipate to see a few more in coming weeks. So then these light green ones are things that are in progress. So you have done one direct observation. I think you should kind of upload them a little bit more just to prove to me that you have done them, and we can ensure that everybody's on track. But this is what people tell me, that they are being done. They are, of course, accompanied by feedback from a person with lived experience. And that's done in a couple of different ways, but I am going to ask some people from our PLE group at Kingston University to come in and talk about that next year, early in the year, I hope. And the index of evidence, which you should be doing as you go. And I hope that you are doing that. And I'll say a little bit more about that later on. You'll do a reflection and practice at the end of the year, which is 1,000 words. It's kind of summary of what you've learned and progress you have made. And the final report, the final assessment of on-the-job learning, is done by the SRA. So everybody contributes to the agreement. The review is essentially led by the apprentice and mentor, who updates on progress, etc., maybe refines some of the learning opportunities. And then all of that evidence is taken into account by the SRA, who will talk to the apprentice and mentor in some detail towards the end of the year, and will write that final review. I mean, you're a little way off that yet, so don't worry about it too much. But just as I said several times, sorry for boring, just for a little bit of contextualization. So those agency descriptions, if you just remember, the idea is to help you look at your agency in a new light, perhaps a more critical light, consolidate your learning, apply it to your place of work. In particular, there's a technical bit about practice and improving your reading and referencing stroke citation. Practice, if you get that at early stage, it will save you a lot of grief later on. And I will continue with feedback, so you can kind of continue to post those, even if it's quite late. Okay, stuff happens. I will continue to feedback on those. So what do you do with this mentoring agreement? So the apprentice will meet with the SRA. Oh, look at that. There's a little typo there. I'll just fix that as I go. And mentor early in the new year, probably around the week of the 8th, maybe a little bit before that, maybe a little after that, but early. Because towards the end of the month, you should submit the final version, as it were. Now, in that first meeting, it's a good idea to finish the tripartite agreement. Get that out of the way. There is a prep form that goes out beforehand. The apprentice and mentor should complete that. You don't need a huge amount of detail there. It's a light touch review, really. I'd like to see you spend your time, emphasis, effort in the mentoring agreement. That's where the magic happens. At that meeting, however, talk about reviewing the mentoring agreement and what might go into it. So what should you focus on? Well, a lot of you put a lot of effort, some of them are really amazing, about that positive working relationship and getting to know each other. I've suggested sometimes that you could do a little bit of work on that and kind of expand it. If you haven't done that work, do it. There's, without a shadow of a doubt, this is 4 years in now, we know that the relationship with the mentor is a critical determinant on the success of the apprentice. So invest in it at an early stage. It's really important. And if you change mentors later on during your course, do the thing again. It's important. It works. It's effective. Really, I'm expecting most of the emphasis is going to go into the learning objectives and opportunities. Now, I have fed back to some people that it needs a little bit of a tweak here and there. So pay attention to that feedback and see if you can kind of update. Expand them as necessary, because as you get more used to doing these documents, you'll get more used to identifying appropriate learning opportunities. Again, this all leads to the final review, so it's building up over time. Effort you put in here will not only make your SRA's life easier at the end, but it will make it easier for you to evidence that you have progressed in the way that you should do over your first year. So when we're talking about describing learning objectives, etc., and opportunities, just the line saying team meeting, as I have kind of said in other videos, not quite doing it. You need to include some element of the intended learning from the outcome. Home visit, learn how to, prepare for a home visit. How to deal with a person who maybe doesn't want you to come into their home. How to kind of listen carefully in the home environment for things that you should be paying attention to, so on and so forth. I mean, I leave it to you, but there needs to be a little bit of the intended or hoped for learning from the activity, not just a simple description of it. Now we are going to introduce the IATE standards. Now, I expect that we'll get a lot of questions about this, but again, don't panic. These are just a set of standards imposed upon us by the people who fund the apprenticeship, right? Now, it happens that the IAT and the PCF do correspond, but you have to do a bit of work on it, and sometimes that would do your head in. So, thankfully, myself and mainly Maxine, who you don't know, but you might come across in class, she's one of the SRA, she's been around for a little while, kind of did some work on a tool, which is essentially a spreadsheet that looks at PCF IATE, IAT PCF. So it's kind of mapping those standards. So we're hoping that when you come to do the index of evidence and the learning opportunities, you'll be able to go, oh, well, it's this PCF, or what IAT is that. Now, it's the kind of thing you don't learn off by heart. It's kind of a reference document, and you should think of the standards that way. But as you go through the next 2.5 years, essentially, you become much more familiar with them. The moment it'll be quite mechanical when you're doing that, but that's okay. So take your time. You have lots of time to learn this. There's a link here to that spreadsheet, but it's in about 4 different places in the module. It's in the assignment section. It's in the assessment briefings. I can't remember where else I put it, but I know I put it somewhere else. And I will send you out a link also. So, yeah, that's it really. 2 sets of standards. We have to use these. We have to evidence these. This tool, hopefully, will make it a bit easier to do that. So the tripartite, I think we know what's involved in this now. So you'll get the tripartite prep form, complete that, send it back to the SRA. When you meet then in the new year, hopefully you'll be able to sit down and kind of work out how much detail you want to put in this. Not a huge amount. Really, by this point, you should kind of have a sense of what the content is. The SRA will do a lot of that on APTEM. You must sign it off in due course, and we'll probably have to chase you for that. But your learning and development lead in your organization signs it off on behalf of the organization. Now, there are audits of these kind of things, so we do kind of experience a certain amount of external scrutiny in this, but if there are any gaps, we will let you know and ask you to complete them. It's a good way to identify any issues that you're experiencing, barriers or obstacles to learning, or, of course, anything that's really helping you with that, because we can track in the tripartites then. If there's an issue, is that being addressed, and do we have a plan? If things are going well, how might we do it even better? So that's what the tripartites are for. I mean, I think a lot of it, things like prevent, if you haven't booked on a prevent refresher training, probably a good idea to do so now. And the other elements of it, I don't think they're hugely problematic, but make sure you complete it, but make sure that the major effort in all of these reviews in January goes into the mentoring agreement. Hope that's clear. Not entirely sure it is. So what happens if support is lacking? What happens if your mentor is not actually meeting you on a regular basis? What happens if your caseload or the amount of casework that you have is not reducing to 80% or less, which we prefer less than 80%? Talk to us. So it's not life-defining at this stage, but if that situation continued on indefinitely, that you weren't getting the support or the time and space you need for learning, then that will become a problem. So best that we try to do something about it now. It may be, for example, that your particular team or context that you're working in at the moment doesn't have sufficient learning opportunities. In that case, we also need to think about, well, what can we do about that? Again, it's about communication, dialogue. If something's not going well, tell us. And as I say, you can go to the SRA, the mentor, of course, and contact myself if you feel the need to do that. So just a little note about the index of evidence. So now you're filling the two columns. You have PCF and then you have IATE. Just the numbers. You don't need to write it all out. We know what the numbers mean, essentially. But collect the evidence. Get in the habit of collecting the evidence and collect it as much as you can. You know, if you have something that happens today, you kind of went, oh, that was kind of interesting. You might, for example, make a little note in your index. You might even make a little note in a reflective journal if you're inclined to keep such a thing, which I would advise you to do. But anyway, so keep it going, because there's nothing worse than trying to do it at the end of the year. That really is not going to work. And the index of evidence really is kind of something that should guide or at least be strongly connected to this review in January. Check out your mentor every time you meet. You know, for the final portfolio, the mentor and the SRA, excuse me, must sign this off. So, do you know what I mean? Sometimes people say what gets looked at gets done. So I would ask the mentors every so often to have a look. Same with the SRAs and the apprentice. Perhaps you could proudly present it to those people to show how on top of the game you are. Evidence for degree programs, all of them is progressive and holistic. It's not an event, it's a process that happens over time. But also we wanted to stand up to internal and external scrutiny. Internal is just ourselves, core staff, teaching staff, SRA, maybe employers. External, there are inspectorates and things of that nature. Every so often they do dip sample, things like index of evidence and stuff of that nature. So you'd want to make sure that that there is no doubt that your evidence will stand up if that ever was requested. So don't want to put the fear of God into people, but I mean, I think there is an element here. You have to be realistic too. You know, there's a certain standard to be met. You can all meet that standard, and this is one of the key ways in which you would do that. What else? Well, we'll be moving on for the second direct observation and the reflection on practice. I don't need to say a great deal about that now, apart from TO2 will be done by the mentor. You got months before you do this, but you can have an initial discussion about it at this stage. You could think about, well, what would I like the mentor to observe? Is there a particular piece of casework that you're kind of pleased with? It's going well. It's complex, but things are progressing on. Or is there a particular aspect of your practice that you'd like to kind of refine on, have a little bit more focus on? So have a little kind of conversation with mentor and SRA, particularly once the review is finished, about what should the focus or the topic of the second direct observation be? More to come, plenty on that later on. And plenty on this too. There's that reflection and practice learning. But really, at this stage, I think a kind of ongoing reflection about what has helped your learning. Did you use supervision? We will ask you to address that. And supervision may be with your manager, your mentor, SRA, whoever it's with. What are you good at? What do you do well? Where do you need to develop a little bit more? Definitely always reflect on what you did well. People sometimes tend to kind of push that away and go, oh, or take it for granted. I have to tell you that a lot of the skills the apprenticeship group have, other people do not have those skills. So just because they seem kind of, I don't know, normal or natural to you, doesn't mean that other people can do this. You know, talk to people who are in difficult situations, perhaps, and things of that nature. Have a meaningful conversation with another human being about the difficulties of their life. There will be a little bit of personal reflection in that too, because we can't entirely separate ourselves from our work. It just doesn't work that way, does it? There are days when we are reminded quite strongly of things that impact upon ourselves, and then we learn how to manage those feelings, thoughts, occasionally even biases that enter into our work. You will have got feedback, particularly by the time you come to the end of the year, from lots of different people. You'll have two PLE feedback, you'll have SRA feedback, mentor feedback. Has that been useful to you? Have you acted upon it? So at the end, of course, a lot of this will be about reflecting on your values and discussing ethical or personal dilemmas. So that process is happening all the time, and we don't actually ask you to write about it specifically and directly until we come to the end of the year. So, the focus is always on you, but that's just not the way it works, is it? Because this enterprise is a joint one. The apprentice, the SRA, the mentor, the teaching staff, maybe your line manager. There's a lot of people involved in your learning, including, of course, people with lived experience. So let's kind of keep that collaborative spirit in mind. And of course, as I keep on saying, and I always mean every time I say it, if you want to talk to me about any element of on-the-job learning, please just do get in touch. I think that'll do for today. As ever, nice to talk to you. Take care. Hope you get some time off for the next few weeks. And if I don't see you before the new year, I'll see you in 2024. Bye.